we're clearly missing two of our team up here, but while they get mic'd up, I can go ahead and get started and intro. I mean, Sam did a fantastic job introing the team, so we wanted to take just a moment and give some context to this session. It's important to understand what we're talking about when we talk about XR and holograms. You know, I had this great conversation with a client just last week about what does XR mean, right? We get into this alphabet soup and we worry so much about the form factor and whether it's AR, VR, MR, IoT. And really, it's XR is X can stand for anything. For the purposes of this conversation, X can stand for anything except the R. So it's anything that's not reality, anything that enhances the human being or the experiencer's reality, that's what makes up XR. So for this discussion, with our stunning team up here, I'm so excited to be with this group because this is something that has been something I've been passionate about since I got into this space. We're going to be talking through and focusing on specifically holograms and holography. When I first started in the AR space, I would get into arguments with people that if it wasn't a head-mounted device, well, it just wasn't AR. You know, if it wasn't in glasses, a handheld, well, that's not AR. And I challenge them to say it's not just handhelds, it's not just glasses, it's everything else. So I'm going to give the panel the opportunity to introduce themselves quickly, but we have a wonderful representation of hardware creators, content creators, and solution providers, which will make an interesting conversation. So maybe, Ashley, you want to start on the end and introduce yourself quickly?
Sure. I'm the co-founder and CEO of VNTANA. We create interactive holograms to engage consumers while tracking data. So we have hardware that basically took a very old Pepper's Ghost methodology into the 21st century. And then we built a software platform all running in game engine to easily create content. And that is display agnostic, but we built hardware because we had to 6 years ago.
I'm Simon Schatzman, and I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Imagination Park, and my background is in media and entertainment. So we've created in Imagination Park a platform that's sort of advancing the adoption of commercial usage for AR and other appliances in terms of advertising, branding, and lots of other sort of interactive, engaging approaches.
I'm Brett Jones, co-founder and CEO of Lightform. We make a hardware-software solution for projection mapping, or what we call projected augmented reality, so AR that you don't have to use a phone or a headset for. And we've been doing that for about 4 years now, and we sell a device right now that's a camera and a computer that attaches to any projector to turn it into a 3D scanner, so you can 3D scan anything in the real world and then turn it into a magical display.
Hello. Hey. Hello, friends. My name's Shawn Frayne. I'm co-founder and CEO of a company in Brooklyn called Looking Glass Factory. You can check us out at booth 705. Look for the big glowing logo in the sky. And we make holographic displays, have been doing so for the last 5 years. These are systems that let folks, a group of folks without any headset on and without head tracking, interact with three-dimensional worlds, just as you would sit around a campfire or a radio, but now with holographic information.
Hey everybody, my name is Isaac Rayment. Sorry to the guys over there, I'm sort of blocked by the podium, but I'm not ignoring you. I come from a company called Immersive Innovations, that's MRSV.io. We're based out of Toronto, Canada. Our main focus is innovating immersive experiences for people. So we work everywhere from augmented reality, virtual reality, projection mapping, and getting into holographic projection as well as working in the audio world as well, starting to augment audio experiences for people.
All right, so I'm going to dive right in and go for the topic. Whenever you start talking about holograms, the first thing that gets very heated and people dive in of, so what does holographic or hologram mean to you? Who wants to take that one first? Because I think it means something different to everybody. Shawn, I think you just volunteered.
Thank you.
All right, get it.
So I have a background in conventional holography, interference patterns of coherent light from a laser captured on a glass slide. So for a long time, I recoiled at the idea of calling anything that wasn't this laser interference pattern a hologram. But things have changed dramatically, in my view, over the last few years, where my own perspective is anything that is three-dimensional content that groups of people can see and interact with classifies as a hologram. In our case, our looking glass displays are light field displays, not what someone in the holographic creation field would call a holographic display. But things have changed so much in the sort of culture of what folks think of a hologram as because of movies and whatnot over the years that we have to call the looking glass a holographic display because that's what folks recognize it as. And I think some of my colleagues have different views on whether three-dimensional content is a necessary part of that and so on.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking earlier, the minute Microsoft had their commercial for the HoloLens and called what they were doing holograms, it's like, okay, it's a free-for-all. Let's all just call everything a hologram that's putting digital into the real world. And at the end of the day, that's what we care about. It's putting digital into the real world, whether that's with a standalone display, projection mapping, holding up your phone, wearing headsets. That's the end goal, and that's what matters.
And I've had some experience with holographic screens. So essentially, they're transparent projection screens that when you project on them, they capture the light, but the light behind them passes through. So we could have a holographic screen here. You guys can see through it, but we could have 3D or holographic content in front of us. So that's as far as my holography goes. That's the extent of my. It's not true holographics, but people identify it as a hologram.
Great. Okay. Any other?
And as it relates to sort of the platform we've developed, it's really just another tool that you can use to sort of, create immersive content.
Fantastic. Okay, so with that being our common understanding of a hologram, my next question, which I love to ask, is why? Why did you get into holograms, or why do you think holograms are an important addition or medium to the XR field, to AR field?
Well, I started in projection mapping, which essentially isn't holographic, but it is a large form. I consider it the original augmented reality. It's augmenting through projection as opposed to adding layers of digital content over the real world. I think that one of the big benefits of that, as well as other holographic displays, is that it is a communal experience. So you can have an audience of people all experiencing it simultaneously, as opposed to screen-based stuff or headset-based stuff, where it is more of a personalized experience that you're sort of isolated. So I think that the communal experience of an audience experiencing something like that is much more profound. Where you have a much more communal experience. I said that too many times, but I think it's that sense of co-experience that really adds to the value.
I mean, we're also still in a very nascent industry, so the less barriers to entry you can have, especially for an older population who still doesn't like using a cell phone, being able to have these standalone displays, they're more welcoming. So my favorite, example from us, back in 2015, we did a hologram of Roger Federer, and you could throw a ball, and his hologram would hit it. This video playing tennis with Roger's hologram. We had an 85-year-old come and do it, and was just laughing and kept getting in line to do it again. It was amazing, and so cool to see that you can get this age range of people when it's non-wearable and just easy to engage with.
I got into this space because I was doing projection mapping back when it was spatial augmented reality before AWE at Disney Imagineering, and I saw this demo that was the most astounding XR demo I've ever seen in my entire life. And no one has ever seen it because it was a $2 million demo in the back of a warehouse, and it wasn't transportable to anywhere else, and you couldn't really install it in a theme park. And so I got hooked on how do we take this thing that most people in this room probably haven't seen most of our products, and how do we get it everywhere?
Yeah, and in my view, holograms are the defense against dystopian futures. So Mark Zuckerberg has a vision of the future in which everyone on the planet will be wearing a VR headset and live in the metaverse for 16 hours a day. That's fucked up. And pulling pieces of digital space into the real world through the work of those of us on the panel here and others that are starting to emerge from the woodwork, I think is the defense against that otherwise inevitable future.
I think too, if you watch any science fiction movies, you always see this idea of the future, Blade Runner or whatever, where there's always these floating holograms in this sort of dark, dingy city. And I think eventually that's where we're headed. Once holograms and holographic projection, even projection mapping and other forms of it will become sort of a part of the landscape.
So if I sort of distill what I've heard each of you say, you're all touching on a different aspect of holograms are a way for us to retain our humanity, whether it's connection, whether it's shared experience, whether it's keeping us all out of a headset. It's really a tool to keep our humanity and to keep connected to one another.
Great.
Yeah, and it's also seamless access to data that you never had before. Being able to have that digital in the real world without having to pull up your phone or put on this headset, that in itself is like a superpower, right? And that's what I'm super excited about.
And I think to expand on that, yeah, it's the fact that you could be walking by and you have a visual experience that's not intentional, that you're not putting on a headset, you're not pulling out your phone, you're not looking through some sort of device to experience it. It's just there. It becomes part of the landscape, and it becomes something that, from the marketing perspective, is a very powerful tool because you have that exposure, that sort of universal exposure where people who may not want to or aren't intentionally interacting with it, it's just there as a part of the landscape.
Okay.
Well, and I think the trend over time has been towards communication technologies and creation technologies and platforms and interfaces, making things more real than they were before, like color TVs after black and white TVs and so on and so on. That is, I think we all do different aspects of that, pulling digital content into the real world, letting you interact with it in a more natural ways, seeing that 3D content in ways that are more natural and more rich. And because it doesn't require the friction of a headset, it preserves this ability to be innately social.
I just sort of a use case a few years ago, Ubisoft, a video game developing company. They're one of my most fun clients, and so we did a game launch for Assassin's Creed a while ago in Toronto, and we projection mapped sort of the facade of a bunch of buildings along the major highway, and we had the character climbing up and jumping from building to building, and we actually caused a few car accidents. There was people that were trying to take pictures or trying to figure out what they were looking at, and so the reps from Ubisoft came and sort of tapped me on the shoulder, and they're like, shaking their fist at me. But for me, that was a metric of success. Like if we're making the news because people are smashing into each other to check out what we're doing, I think that was a successful campaign.
We're supposed to be retaining the humanity, not killing it.
No, there was no.
That's a tough KPI to put into a business plan. I'm just going to say, please don't take that as a best practice. But it's cool. It's really cool. Okay, so that's actually a great lead into my next question is, you've already begun touching on it. What do you see some of the real opportunities are, like already or in the future, for what you're working on in holograms or outside of traditional AR?
For us, we've really found our niche helping consumer brands engage with people, and in that, reducing the amount of inventory they need. So we have clients like Lexus and high-end jewelry companies where that inventory is extremely expensive. It's not possible to even have all of it in their store or in their dealership. And so we have holographic displays where you can pick your color, your rims, your interior, or the jewelry, pick gold, rose gold, whatever, email yourself that same 3D asset that's from our system on our displays. We're launching later this year, so the mobile SDKs, you could hold it up at home and show your husband, this is what it looks like, on your hand, a hint. But that has been a real pain point. So with digital inventory, I know AT&T, one of the reasons they invested so much in Magic Leap, they only can show about 10% of the products they have in each retail store. So it's a real pain point to solve.
I guess my question is holographic diamonds as big or as large as regular diamonds?
Well, you can make them bigger, yeah.
Don't get any big ideas.
Yeah.
I think as far as, we see sort of the application is, it all comes back to like, how do you monetize things? So how can you take sort of content and make it have a value proposition for whoever is going to be engaging in the content? And as a subset to that, how does a brand want to monetize that? Is there a sponsorship opportunity? So it's really about, creating sort of the engaging or immersive world where, now you can begin to look at it from a perspective of, how can I make money from this? Or what's the action I'm looking to, get out of this particular activation?
So we sell to designers of spaces and experiences, so retail, hotels, restaurants, location-based entertainment. And what has been interesting is a shift in who installs AV equipment. So today there's 3 guys in the back, running the audio and doing the visuals, and there's a giant projector that probably costs like $5,000 to rent in the back. And that's typically who does an AV install and who specs digital inside of a physical space. And what we're seeing with the new form factors and with projection mapping is that the designer can be in charge. So the designer that's the graphic designer, the retail designer, the event experiential marketing designer, they can actually be in charge of speccing, creating content, and installing. And that's been transformative to see people replace TVs, screens, flat projections with something that's much more creative than we've seen before, because now it's easy enough that anyone can do it.
For us, our initial market were developers using our Unreal SDK, Unity SDK, things like that to create in the Looking Glass. Now, very quickly, just after a few months of shipping developer kits of the Looking Glass, now folks are starting to build applications for enterprise use cases. So there's a company called OrthoScience that's building an application in which you can take dental scans from CT scanner, intraoral scanner, and then have those appear in a platform like the Looking Glass, initially for surgeons to understand best practices, but very soon for patients to see what their current teeth look like, and then what procedures are going to be done and how those teeth will change after those procedures. So there's a lot of medical applications, real estate, 3D simulations, and things of that nature. Really a wide world wherever groups of people need to interact with truly three-dimensional content.
I sort of skirt the line between the two worlds. One, marketing is usually what pays my bills, and then as sort of a creative output is what sort of feeds my soul. So I sometimes I bill for it and sometimes I pay for it. Don't tell my clients this, but if they weren't paying me, I would still be creating projection mapping experiences for people.
Don't anybody tweet that, okay?
So keep that to yourselves. But I think right now one of my big projects is I'm trying to bring the projection mapping, the global community together. We're working on a global tour / competition where we're touring around a projection map set. So all the projection mapping artists in each of the cities that we visit get to project onto the same canvas. So therefore the judging of the projection mapping is fair. So I see, moving forward, I see projection mapping. I lived in Montreal for a while. I don't know if any of you have been to Montreal, but they love projecting on stuff. So half that city, the landscape is projection art. And I think that's going to become more and more something that's prevalent around the world. And then as those installations are sort of become more common, they will also become a marketing canvas. They'll become basically video, digital billboards for brands to market through.
Okay. So thinking about that for a second, and outside of don't cause car accidents, what are some common misconceptions or things that you would caution clients that come to you and want to work with holography or holograms? What are some lessons learned?
I would say just what you need for the content creation. So that has always been an issue. And so if it's a living person, we do have to capture them. We cannot use existing footage. We cannot just take a photo and magically create a hologram. We do have to capture them. With products, there's a lot of companies that do 3D scans, something that VNTANA's done to really expedite and make it cheaper, because we were realizing we were losing jobs because, Adidas would go hire a CGI company and pay them millions of dollars to recreate their assets. We're like, wait a second, you've got this manufacturing design file, we can just take that. So we've written some software to convert that automatically into 3D asset for a game engine. We're starting to license that out because we really see the barrier to entry in this new AR, VR, XR space is the content creation. And so just knowing that you can't use existing 2D assets.
Any others?
I agree totally.
Yeah, I would add maybe sometimes customers will focus on the technology instead of the experience, and they'll want to spec something that is so far out of their budget that you can't imagine. Like the number of people that come to us and want to project on a building, we're like, sure, $2 million, right, just for the projector rental budget.
Wow, can I have your clients? That sounds great.
Yeah. Well, no, they say no then.
Yeah.
But they'll see something, they'll see the Tupac hologram, they want something very specific. And typically content creation is the thing that makes that prohibitively expensive.
I think one thing that I see as far as like moving forward, one thing I mean, I've been proposing, but again, we hit this. They ask how much it's going to cost, and when you tell them, they sort of run away screaming. But one thing is interactivity with holograms. We pitched Ubisoft again a while ago for a launch in LA that was basically a conversational hologram. So we were taking characters from the game that the press could then go have a full conversation with. So we had an artificial intelligence backend, basically a sophisticated chatbot that could then puppet this character. I think things like that are going to become much more available, cost-effective, like economies of scale once it starts deploying more regularly. There's some companies that are working on virtual humans that are creating essentially photorealistic humans that are AI puppeted that then are going to be replacing customer service, et cetera, et cetera. So instead of going and talking to a clerk at a desk, you'll be talking to a holographic AI chatbot that you will have. It will be almost indistinguishable from actually interacting with a real human. So.
Sure. So that's a great segue into my next question, which is, what do you see as the future, both near term as well as longer term? And it could be the future that you see coming as well as the future that you want, that you're working towards. What do you think is the future?
I think the main future is that this isn't a small panel at AWE, right? That other form factors start to take over more and more of what we think of as XR and AR.
I think that there's a convergence, and I think that's probably been echoed in a lot of the different rooms around the conference here, is that there's going to be blurred lines where augmented reality, virtual reality, holographics, all that stuff is sort of converge into a single interface where you're just interacting with that augmentation, or whatever that means.
And assuming our brains aren't blown out by 5G, I think the adoption of some of the higher, some of the advent of that technology is going to be able to create a different sort of experience as well.
Yeah, and I'm just excited just to see this conference and how big it is. It's all coming. Whether the phones coming out this year are going to enable such better tracking, and the just use of mobile AR is going to get bigger. You have all of us doing things where you don't need the phone. Everyone is going to need to get on board. We really focus on brands, so I see the future of shopping 100% being AR, VR. There's some companies working on programmatic advertising in VR. Yep. If you want your Nike shoe on that zombie, you need a 3D model to do that. Whether or in any of our displays. So I would say, any brands out there, start thinking about how you can track and create these assets now, because whatever form factor, it's coming, and it's coming very soon because of 5G, because of all of the amazing people at this conference and the tech that they're building.
Yeah, I think the power of it really is in the hands of the creators ultimately. I mean, the assets are going to be out there. It's going to take, really powerful creative to bring it all together, because really the options are going to be unlimited. You can marry things together that you haven't been able to do before. So I think ultimately the platforms will be out there. The creators are really going to drive it to the next level.
And I think to sort of follow up on that with sort of talking again about the future of where it's going is, I think that the process of creating, of designing and deploying augmented reality or virtual reality over any platform is going to become increasingly simple. And I think that one of the key things that potentially is missing in the market right now, so one of the barriers for mass adoption is the fact that the general public can't create and they can't share. So they're not participating. And I think once there's a sort of a universal tool set, doesn't even need to be universal. Once there's an accessible tool set where people can create and share, which I may or may not be working on, I can't say. When the general public starts to participate, then they're much more likely to consume. And so I think that on the advent of that, I think that we're going to see a much faster adoption rate and a much more sort of universal interactivity from the public. So.
Yeah, and I can just add to that, because we are working on that, and that's exactly what we do. We've put together a platform that's clearly easy to use, very simple, and has all the immersive tools necessary for creators to bridge together all the technology. And so for us, it's really been a form of working with creators and brands and advertisers and sports teams, whatever it may be, to help them with the next stage of adoption, which is really, for sports teams, it can be in-game, experiences immediately, or for advertising brands, it can be, how do you have dual level experiences? So it's there, and we just sort of have to, get the adoption going, I guess.
Yeah, and I see some specific things coming over the next 5 years in holographic interface land that might not be on the general public's radar. Things like software robots that speak with the voice of voice AI, like the voice of Alexa in people's homes, I think is much more likely than a physical robot speaking with the voice of Alexa, because it can change from Woody from Toy Story 1 second and then to Teddy Ruxpin reading an Audible book the next second. Things like Holo Skype, where a wall is a shared experience between two places in the world. Like we have a lab in Brooklyn and a lab in Hong Kong, and we're constantly trying to find ways to connect better with each other. So I see that coming right around the corner. And a lot of folks that I've chatted with view that as being like 50 years away, but it's a few years away. And because it has this because of the work that those of us on this panel and hopefully more soon will do, has this innate zero friction sort of characteristic that you just walk up to it and you interact with that interface. I think it's going to spread around the world way faster than folks expect. I actually think that holographic interfaces are going to be the primary interface.
Agree. I always give the example, like 2 years ago, being here, someone was walking around wearing a headset, and people looked at him kind of funny, and I was like, if you can't wear a headset at an AR conference in Silicon Valley, you cannot wear it anywhere, So definitely not to the mall anytime soon. So, I'm excited to see the form factor shrink and get more normal, but at the end of the day, if you're in the middle of shopping or at a football game or any of that, I think it's these other displays that are just more welcoming.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about case usage. I can talk about one interesting thing we're doing that's sort of holographic in a way. We are working with the Basketball Hall of Fame, and upon entry, they have celebrities literally greeting you. So it's, Shaquille O'Neal meeting you at the door and welcoming you and maybe walking you through exhibits. So it becomes a more, experiential thing, and embracing the holograms and sort of experiences that way are things that we're already doing. So I mean, it's going to become more and more commonplace over time.
So Simon just shared an implementation of your company that you like. Do you guys have something that you saw someone, the client, work with your technology, or a favorite implementation, favorite use case that you'd share? I was like inspiring people.
Sure. About a month ago, a developer in community in Japan, where there's a 300-person Looking Glass club that we didn't set up, which I'm very proud. Anyway, his name's Masuji Suto, and he took our 3JS library and then took 360 3D video, which we totally dismissed as being something that was viable in a display like the Looking Glass, pulled it in a weekend, and then shared it as a web application. We looked at it in our team, we're like, oh my God, there's this whole new world of capture of 360 3D video that we had no idea worked for our interface. And we're actually showing that the first time, besides folks who were using Masuji's app in the community here at AWE, and it's really powerful, and I think it opens up a wide range of applications. And it's that sort of balance, I think, that Brett's getting at between the creative developer community and then other applications that are opened up through the insights that bubble up from that community.
Yeah, and for us, I'd say we're just really fun one. This year we did holograms of Kobe. So sports, if you're looking to monetize, sports is a great starting place. But we did, it's a hologram of him for the city of LA, and his hologram, it's gone to China, it's going all other places to like invite people to come visit LA. And then people get to take photos next to his hologram, and it's just really fun seeing fans like have this experience that they could never have before. So all of those like types of leveraging endorsement deals is always super fun.
I would say some of the fun stuff that I'm working on, and it's not specifically holographics. I don't know, it's not relevant, but I'm going to tell you anyways. One of the things I'm working on is basically talking T-shirts. So we're working with, this is not endorsed by anybody, but we are working with a Bill Murray T-shirt, and we've downloaded a whole bunch of audio samples of Bill Murray, and you can actually talk to the T-shirt. The T-shirt comes to life. I'm hoping to bump into him. I'm heading up to LA. I'm hoping to bump into him. There's a Ghostbusters reunion happening there, and I'm going to strap on the T-shirt and accidentally bump into him and show him, and so hopefully get him into the studio to record some sound bites for us to extend that to a much more wide library of interactions that people can have with those shirts.
If it doesn't scare them.
Yeah.
So if anybody knows Bill Murray and can help make this happen,
make an
on
intro.
our own, we heard it right here, beginning of something big.
Another fun thing that we're doing, we're working on, I like taking science fiction and trying to make it real. So one of the things we're working on is holographic presentation system similar to what you would see in Minority Report. So basically gesture-based, instead of standing behind a podium with a PowerPoint clicker, you can actually interface with your media in a holographic way to really make dynamic presentations possible. And hopefully we're going to have that done sometime this summer and roll it out in the fall. So I should talk to some of these guys about using their holographic systems to deploy that.
Yeah, speaking of science fiction, related to my favorite example, I think a lot of our industry in AR, XR is really influenced by science fiction movies specifically. So you see Minority Report, and then everyone wants to wave their hands in the air. Blade Runner is a bit more in our space, I think. Yeah. Maybe a little too dystopian still. But my favorite example is that the way that they actually do special effects, a lot of it is practical special effects. So if you look at sci-fi today, you'll see a lot of transparent interfaces. And the reason why there's transparent interfaces is because you can buy them. So they're actually taking real displays and then they're filming them in camera. And so right now, the view of the future of computing in science fiction is things that you can buy on the market today or pay very cheap to do CG on. And so we're not seeing a lot of innovation in terms of crazy display tech in science fiction. But there is one major science fiction TV show that's now using Lightform as the future of display, which I'm pretty proud of.
Wow, that's cool.
Can you
What
tell us
TV
the
show?
name of the show?
I cannot.
It's not out yet?
It is not out. No.
Okay, when it comes out, are you going to tweet it out? or
Sure,
something?
yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Promise
Stay
that.
tuned.
We are all waiting now.
Something else to consider, I think, is where we're talking primarily about visual augmentation. And I think that something that's overlooked is audio, and that there's a lot of stuff pushing forward in the audio front.
You read my mind. I was just about to take you there.
Sorry, I just jumped in on that. So Bose has some stuff. I don't know if you guys have seen. I think they did a presentation earlier today where they have augmented headphones for people who are visually impaired, or even not even just visually impaired people, but to add sort of contextual information to your location specifically, which is a great use case. But as well, there's a company, oh no, where are they from? I think Boston, I might be wrong, called Holosonics, and they have something called a Audio Spotlight. So it's something they came out with about 5 years ago, I think, and I haven't really seen it bubble up in the marketplace, and I've been bugging my clients to try to let me use it because it seems like a lot of fun. So what they can do is they can project audio into a very specific location. So if you're here, complete silence. As soon as you sort of break it's the opposite of cone of silence, the cone of noise. So as soon as you break in, you have high fidelity, high quality sound. I'm toying with the idea right now, trying to get clients to buy in for a grocery store installation. So when you're standing in front of the eggs, you get a certain, secret message. Yeah. So they've done some case. There was one that I think was deployed in New York, and it was for a horror movie. So when you stood in public in front of this movie poster, there was these sort of demonic voices in your head, and it freaked people out a little too much. They ended up canceling the campaign, but. Interesting. So
we've been looking at that because we do a number of like retail displays, but it'll be like, for one brand in a Sephora or one brand in a Foot Locker, and obviously they say they're not allowed to have audio because if they let every brand have audio, it would be like awful walking into that store, right? So that's interesting, but it's so impactful when the audio matches the digital that you're seeing. For the Pro Football Hall of Fame, we partnered with Dolby it was like one of the first installations of their Atmos sound system. And so you get this pep talk from Joe Namath, these other famous NFL players as holograms, but combined with their like surround sound, it really felt like you were in the locker room during a game. Like it felt like the fans were there. It felt like his voice was coming from his holographic projection, so it made it like that much more real. And it's still there if you ever go to Canton, Ohio. It's just not a lot of people go to Ohio. I don't know.
Fantastic. So, I think my takeaways here at this point is if I were to walk away from the ideas that I'd love for people to walk out of here with is really holograms are important for us to retain our humanity and our shared experience and connection, and to be thinking about how we can increase that connection using holography, but then also things like sound, and thinking about the other senses that we can incorporate, and really thinking beyond the screens or the lens to make this happen. I think it's excellent. Any other points? Otherwise, I'll open it up. I think we have a couple minutes left for QA.
Maybe just one thing. As far as in the projection mapping world, a lot of times I'll go and see a projection mapping installation. What they do is they turn on the projection mapping, and it's like, boom, here's our best little bit, and they sort of like, blow off the big guns right out of the gates. And I think that there's still an element of storytelling. There's still an element of sort of a narrative arc that I think is important, that a lot of developers or a lot of creators don't consider. So if anybody out there is creating projection mapping or any sort of visual installation, just keep that in mind, that it's, you ease people in. And some of the best use cases I've had have been, I was in Ibiza doing some projection mapping there, and what we try to do is we let them think that it's reality for long enough that they stop focusing on it, or they stop. We did this one, it was a sort of a garden projection, and they thought they were standing in a garden, and then we had fairies and stuff sort of pop out of the bushes, and then these portals started opening up and things started coming through, and it was Ibiza, so these people were already fairly, they were already augmented at that point, but same thing, I did a TED Talk stage, and where when you make things as subtle as possible when you start, and then you ease them into it, there's a much better emotional reaction to it. And again, back to the storytelling thing, that you really should take them on a journey, and not just sort of say, hey, here's a great big gimmick, and then have nowhere to go with it.
That's an excellent point. So we have just a couple minutes left for Q&A. Unfortunately, we don't have microphones out in the audience, but if anyone wants to ask their questions, please speak up. Anybody?